You're listening to the Big Three of B2B Leadership podcast with Mike Faherty, where world-class business leaders share their secrets for personal, organizational, and market growth. Gain powerful insights from industry leaders that have been tested by the fire.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Big Three of B2B Leadership, where we invite industry leaders to share their insights on personal and professional development, developing and maintaining operational excellence in an organization, and of course, expanding your company's position in the marketplace. My name is Mike Faherty. I'm your host today. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Clay Spitz. Clay is a Chief Outsiders Managing Partner based here in Houston, where I'm located. Clay has spent nearly 30 years in the trenches of mid-market companies driving growth as a market leader, company president, and even a company owner. I'm excited to talk about business growth with Clay today. So Clay, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Mike, I'm so glad to be here, and I appreciate the invitation and great catching up with you.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Clay, you and I have met, we're obviously both here in Houston. We've met several times over the years, and I've always enjoyed our conversations. So I was really excited to get a chance to record a conversation with you. They're always really insightful. So thanks for jumping on.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
No problem. Well, look, hey, before we start talking about CMOs and marketing and chief outsiders and all the cool stuff that you're working on right now, I always like to start at the beginning, right? Go back to the origin. So I'm always interested in the origin story. So were you always a marketer, or did you kind of grow into that direction and that focus in your career?
Well, that really is an interesting question, and I'll keep the story short. But, I grew up in the operations of the business. I grew up in a family business. My dad started a pest control company in 1950 that really old timers around Houston might recognize, called Big State Pest Control. And I joined him out of college, a couple of years out of college. And, I'd grown up in the business and eventually came to run the business. And then we had an opportunity to sell it. We sold our business into a roll-up. I stayed on with the roll-up. And we eventually, making the longer story shorter, got sold to Terminix, at the time, the biggest national pest control company, who we would never have sold our business to because they were the big bad guys. I worked in Terminix for about a year as a regional manager and got a call one day from the CEO's secretary, back when we had secretaries. And she told me, Clay, I need you in Memphis tomorrow. I've got a ticket waiting at the ticket counter. Okay, right. That tells you again how long ago that was. And she couldn't tell me why, but I went to Memphis the next morning, sat with the CEO of Terminix and the senior VP of marketing for the parent company, ServiceMaster. After some chit chat, they said, Clay, we'd like you to move to Memphis and be the VP of marketing for Terminix. And I looked at them both like they were crazy. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm not a marketing guy. I'm an operations guy. I've been running all these operations. It's what I've done all my life. And the senior VP of marketing for ServiceMaster looked at me and said, Clay, you're a marketing guy. You just don't realize it. And that VP of marketing that for a company that was at the time $500 million in revenue, literally my first marketing job.
Right.
But Paul Burt turned out to be right. I was a marketing guy. I just didn't know it. And all the marketing things I was doing were strategic marketing. I wasn't an advertising expert or anything like that. But I just always thought about the strategy of a business and business growth and how do you get customers and what's important to customers and all those sorts of things that came naturally, probably from my dad, who was also a very natural marketer and sales guy. And so, that was my first job in marketing. And I was head of marketing in 3 other companies since then, and then joined Chief Outsiders in 2010, which was just barely into the first year of the company, when there were 6 of us. There were 4 of us in Houston and 2 in Austin. And nobody had a clue what a fractional chief marketing officer was. We've come a long way.
I think I met Art Saxby, the founder, if I have that right. I think I met him right around that time, not long after I started my agency. And so It must have been extremely early. I think there was only a few guys. Maybe you weren't even there yet. It's even possible. I mean, it was probably 10, 12 years ago. So it was. I remember thinking, this is a brilliant idea. Like this is incredible. I had already started to hear about fractional CFOs. That was a thing that people were starting to do, and of course that made sense, right? Because people have been outsourcing to agencies and outsourcing to consultants their accounting and tax preparation and financial management. It felt comfortable, right? People have been doing that and already gotten over that idea.
That's right.
But the idea of bringing in someone on a fractional or a shorter term basis to manage marketing was a brand new idea at the time. So that was really cool.
It was brilliant, and obviously we're a 10 or 12-year overnight success. We spent a lot of years struggling trying to get the business going, and I think we had something like $300,000 in revenue among the six of us for the first year that I was there. And so we've come a long way.
Yeah, you sure have. So just because I'm curious, I know that you guys have hit the Inc. 5000. How many times have you hit it? You've been on there more than once, right?
Oh, I believe we're on our 8th year.
Wow.
And the stat that I heard is that there are less than 100 companies in the country that have been on the list 8 years running.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations. I know you played a big part in making that happen. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm proud to have been here from close to the beginning, and
right.
Been a part of the growth. It's been fun.
It's funny. I related to this story. Your first marketing job was the VP at Terminex. My first marketing job was whenever I started a marketing company. And so, sometimes it's in us, and you have to just pull it out. It was there all along, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was a marketer. I was a frustrated marketer stuck in a salesman's role. So I can relate to that.
Yep.
So one of the things I heard you say when I was kind of preparing today, I heard you said that marketing is bending the company and its products to meet the needs of the customer. I'm paraphrasing there. Hopefully I've got that right.
Yep, you're very close.
So I see this disconnect all the time, Clay. I see this disconnect I see it a lot in startups where there's a disconnect between the solution and what the real problem is that the customer has. Are you surprised at how often established businesses still haven't made that connection directly?
Not anymore.
Okay.
I see it all the time. It's with almost all of the clients we see. There's a gap. And Mike, you could look at almost any company's website, especially B2B companies. And the very common thing you see is, let me tell you how great we are. Let me tell you all the things that we do. Here are all the products that we sell and all the services we offer. And the about us is all about, we started in business 30 years ago and we did this and that. And never a mention of the customer's pain point. Never a mention of how we solve the pain for a customer. And it's a completely common malady among companies. So it's nowhere near just startups. Mid-market companies and even larger. Everybody loves to talk about themselves, and they forget that the only thing the customer cares about is the problem that they have and how you're going to solve
it. It's so common, Clay. What I think is so funny, funny. It's humorous now, but it's frustrating because people don't know that the mistake that they're making oftentimes. But you open up that sort of mid-sized company's website, and right on the cover of their homepage is this great shot of the team standing in front of a building.
Right.
Yeah. You're like, what is, that's not what I want to see, right? I want to see myself somewhere. I want to see myself and figure out how you're going to help me have a positive experience, how you're going to change my life. I'm not interested in how many employees you have or what your building looks like or what your signage looks like out front. And people just make that mistake all the time. The smiling shot of the CEO, like, no, how about a smiling customer?
Yeah.
Where I can look at it and go, that looks like me. And I can relate to that. That person looks really happy about the experience they're having. Maybe I want to have that experience too. It's so simple.
Well, it's seemingly simple, but a lot of people miss it, and here's potentially one reason. And Mike, we were talking earlier. You've read the Growth Gears, kind of our primer on marketing, and there we go, right on your desk there. I appreciate that. One of the things we found very early in the company when we commissioned some research that the University of Texas did for us, their business school, was that CEOs tend to fall into two categories. At least in this study they did: very operationally focused and outwardly market focused. That's kind of how we broke it down. And the majority of CEOs were operationally focused. And what that meant was they came from disciplines where they were looking inside the company all the time. They're looking at the metrics, they're looking at the quality, they're looking at people, and everything is inside the four walls of the company. Nothing wrong with that. It's really important in running a great company. And sometimes the best run companies have the hardest time growing. And the reason for that is the skills that it takes to run a company well are very different from the skills it takes to grow a company. And to run a company well, you have to be internally focused to really kind of get the process right, get the people right, get the metrics right. But to grow a company, you have to be focused on the outside. You have to look outside the window, outside the company, and figure out how you align. So, you mentioned a couple of minutes earlier that my favorite definition of marketing is bending the company and its products or services toward the mind of the customer. Well, that presumes fairly obviously that you understand the mind of the customer, that you've taken the time to know who your customer is and how they think and what they need, so that you can direct your company to serve them well. And I'll give you the corollary to that while we're talking, that sales is bending the mind of the customer toward the company and its products or services. And so if sales and marketing are working together well, marketing is driving the future of the company. They're driving the vision of where we're going to be as a company so that we are best at serving our customers. Where sales is taking that direction, getting customers who fit and bring them toward the company to help them understand why the company is the best option for them among all the different alternatives.
So if I'm a business owner or business leader in one of these mid-sized companies, and I'm listening to that, and I'm starting to panic a little bit because I'm afraid maybe I don't really understand who my customer is, or maybe that's been a haunting feeling that I haven't really vocalized yet.
Yeah.
What are some of the fastest, easiest, most consistently successful ways to get a grip on who your customer is?
Well, there are a lot, but I'm going to give you one that's just so obvious, it sounds ridiculous. Talk to them. Think about where we are, and anybody listening to this podcast in the future will never forget where we were in 2021, thinking that earlier in the year we were post-pandemic, and now we've got another variant and all this uncertainty in the marketplace. And think about how much business has changed in the last year and a half to 2 years. And I was leading a workshop in Dallas 2 days ago. And one of my first questions of the audience, and there were probably 75 people in the room, I said, and we were talking about insight, the first gear in the growth gears. I said, how many of you have talked to your customers, talked to a customer in the last 12 months to ask them how their business has changed, how their needs for your products or services have changed? What do they see as the future needs of their business? There were 5 people that raised their hand in that room of 75. Everybody else is hunkered down, trying to do what they do and keep things going. And almost nobody went out to sit with a customer and say, what's going on in your business? how can I serve you better? What's changed? And what do you need from us that would make your business more successful? And, you can't always get all the answers that way because, with all due respect, sometimes customers don't know what they need, or they're not completely honest with you if you're not really asking open-ended questions. If you just want to know, hey, how we doing? Tell me I'm doing great. Give me a compliment. Tell me I've got all your business. And you can ask questions that way and you get those kinds of answers. But when you genuinely want to know, and you've got a relationship with a customer that can talk to you, you can learn an unbelievable amount. And so sometimes it really is as simple as just go sit down with your customers and talk to them.
One of the things that we do early in our engagements with clients is do that for them. We can't do it at a large scale because budgets usually don't allow for it. But if we can just talk with 2 or 3 or 4 customers and just have that conversation, and us having it without the customer, without our client in the room, oftentimes gets we get more candid feedback. When you ask, mistake I see people make a lot is they send the salespeople out to have that conversation.
Oh, bad idea. Yeah.
Right. And the salespeople are just looking for the next opportunity. And that's what they're there for. So that's not a negative mark on them. They've got an objective, and they should be always thinking about their objective. So it's best to send someone who doesn't have a quota and has no skin in the game, per se, to go and have that conversation with the customer, whether it be a third party or it be just someone else within the company. It's amazing how simple something like that is. And then there's other strategies, right? Surveys and other things that you can do to try to get more feedback at scale. But
yeah. And under the, one of the things, Mike, that people in companies often miss is looking at themselves from the standpoint of the market and trying to understand what is it that we bring to the table that's different from our competitors, what's really unique. And my rule is it can never be we give better service, because everybody says that.
Whether it's true or not, they all say it.
Whether it's true or not, everybody says it. Now, the test is if you could write a statement with your logo at the top and replace your logo with your top competitor's logo, and it would be just as true, it's not different. And or at least if your competitor could say it with some credibility, it's not different. And so you've got to find things that are important to the customer. Okay. Not we've had our team together for 30 years and nobody's as old and established as we are, or whatever those kind of generic things might be. But how do you serve your customers in a way that's different and valuable to them? And you'd be surprised how many leaders of companies have a really hard time articulating that.
Yeah.
They really don't know how they're doing. Well, I guess we're not that different. Our prices are lower. Well, that's the least fun place to be. Is let's see if we can be the cheapest. That's a horrible way to differentiate yourself.
Right. And sometimes, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I found that you just have to broaden your perspective and look at other parts of the company that you don't think about. Right? Maybe the way you handle billing is unique, right? Maybe the way you handle customer service issues is unique, or maybe you're leveraging a tool or technology that other people aren't leveraging, or maybe you built your own proprietary system that makes some part of the delivery or the customer experience special, right?
As long as it addresses a pain point that the customer has and is important to them,
right? And
you're able to address that pain point and solve it in a different and better way than your competition.
Excellent. It's almost concentric circles, right? All your differentiators, all of their needs, where do they overlap? That's the home run. That's the spot where you're aiming for.
Absolutely.
So as you work with these CEOs and business leaders as a CMO in your team as a CMO, what are the characteristics that you find are most consistent amongst the CEOs that are going to be successful?
Among the ones that are successful or going to be successful,
Right.
One is a discontent with the current status quo. To me, a really good CEO is never satisfied with where they are. We do work with some companies that are struggling to grow. They're in negative growth territory or just above zero and really want to do a lot better. We work with some companies that are growing very nicely, but they know that what they're doing today doesn't get them to where they want to be in the future. And they know they need to make changes. They can't keep doing what they're doing and still achieve the success in the longer term that they are looking for. So it's that dissatisfaction with the status quo and knowing that they could be better at what they do. It's being willing to admit that they have a problem. I've talked to some business owners who insist that everything is great, and maybe it is, but they'll never admit that their company is failing in some way or another, that if they could get better, they'd have better success. And so I think you have to be willing to admit as a business owner that there's room for improvement and that there are people who know things that you don't know, and that you're willing to open yourself up to bring in knowledge into your company that you don't already know. Surround yourself with people that know more than you do. I think those are a couple of indicators of future success.
So I think that's I see that a lot. I think just a humbleness and a willing to recognize, hey, that things aren't necessarily perfect, and just I had that conversation with someone today. Like, I won't be mad if you disagree with me, and I won't be mad if you think it's a terrible idea. I'm happy to have the conversation, because usually the outcome of that conversation, I'm either going to be able to defend my position in a way that solidifies my own belief and makes me feel like, okay, I really do have a handle on it, or I'm going to be exposed. And that causes me to think, okay, so what else am I missing? Right. And so I think those are really powerful examples. So what's sort of the corollary to that is the red flags. The guy who can't admit those things is kind of the red flag that this one might be a problem. One of the things that oftentimes is marketing professionals and people who help other businesses implement marketing programs to be successful is the dreaded unrealistic expectation, right? So, hey, I'm gonna bring you in and you're the Messiah, and we've established a budget or some sort of a compensation or budget range, and now I expect 10x growth over the next 3 years, right? Yeah. So, how do you help bring reality to those moments with them? I know that's a tough conversation you've probably had more times than you care to admit.
Yeah, and sometimes that conversation is, okay, well, let's work this through. You're at $5 million and you want to be at $50 million in 3 years. So let's look at what you have to do at 50 million. How many new accounts do you need to have every year in order to grow at the rate to get there? How many of those accounts do you have to keep? What has to happen to your pricing? And you can very quickly start to, even on the back of a napkin, rough out a model that says, well, it's possible, but we're going to need significant investment in the company. We're going to need to grow our staff perhaps by 8x, if not 10x. We're going to have to offer new products or services. I mean, there are companies that scale at that level. They tend to be technology companies, but there are other companies that can scale at that level. But the work that it takes to get there, not everybody is willing to commit to the work, to the money that you have to invest in order to get that kind of growth. And so when you start to challenge the assumptions, what does it really take to 10x or to 5x or to 3x in 3 or 4 years? And can we really achieve that? I think that's where it starts to get real, because it's so nice. Oh man, wouldn't it be great if we were $50 million in 3 years.
It's funny how sometimes it's just a simple math problem, right? So at this level, this is how much money your company is making. If you took every one of those dollars, and this is what it costs you to acquire a customer today, let's take all of those dollars and divide it by how many customers you need. There's not enough money to get that kind of growth, right? So, well, then let's start solving that problem. Where can we get more money, right? If that's truly what we want to do. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of times people just think, they get caught up in a mindset of, they would never say this, but the thinking is, hey, we're going to go viral. Like if we could just tell the world how wonderful we are, everyone is going to rush to us. It's just that simple.
Yeah, right.
Just that simple, right?
Yep.
And in some cases, if you're a unicorn, it's happened, right? I mean, not every company is going to be the next Slack, right? It's just $100 million overnight.
Yeah.
So the that was more for me, because that's a conversation that we tend to have quite often, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
So this dynamic of growth is the marketing continuum. I'm figuring out how to ask this question, but the marketing continuum is really, I think marketing includes sales. Is the way I see the world. That marketing is one part sales, one part marketing or demand generation, the things that go on in the top of the funnel. And then you can say above that, maybe there's something called branding that goes on that's important, right? But this dynamic and this handoff that goes on in the marketplace or within companies, specifically between marketing and sales, if we were to say simply, to oversimplify, that marketing's job is to create demand and sales team's job is to realize the demand and turn it into revenue, there's this really interesting dynamic that happens within organizations, particularly ones that aren't winning right now, but have the potential to win. I don't know how many times I've felt like I'm mediating, divorced parents, right? Where it's, the sales team is telling the CEO, hey, if we just could get some decent leads for marketing, we would be successful. And marketing is saying, I'm generating leads hand over fist. If I could just get the salespeople to work the leads, and then to tell us what happened to them, there's more than enough opportunities for us to win here.
Yeah.
So my guess is you've probably found yourself in a similar position, looking at this sort of conflicted. It's not a conflicting interest, right? If they're both being successful, they should be aligned, right? How do you help an organization solve that dynamic?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. And one place I'll start, and perhaps this is a discussion for another day, but you and I may disagree on the fact that sales and marketing are the same thing. I would maybe call them two sides of the same coin. Fair. But very different functions, even going back to my definition of marketing and sales that we talked about earlier. But I'll tell you what has changed the dynamic in sales and marketing. It's over the last 15 years probably, but compressed in the last couple of years, is that it's just not so simple to create demand and execute on that demand to create revenue, because digital marketing and the digital landscape has changed how a lot of that works. The changing habits of the different generations, as the younger generations start to grow up into decision-making authority, their style of interacting with companies is different than it was when you and I were growing up in our careers. And companies have to adapt to that. And there's, in one of my workshops, there's a slide that I use that shows the, marketing and sales funnel from awareness to consideration to actual, conversation, and on into the areas where we're actually being evaluated, proposing, and closing a deal. Where marketing used to be responsible for awareness and a little bit of consideration. And think about marketing in that context as the advertising piece, the getting our name out in front of our constituency piece, because the true marketing, some of us grew up with the 4 Ps. There have been a lot of iterations of what marketing really is, but these strategic pieces of what is your product and do you have product market fit? And what are your distribution channels? And what is your pricing strategy? Those are all strategic pieces that lead to ultimately the promotion. But in the promotional area, when we've identified who our customers are, we know what our value proposition is, we know what our messaging is, and now we get people in the top of the funnel. They're often looking around and they're not ready to make a decision yet, and they're not ready to be handed off to sales. And my experience is that salespeople, good salespeople, and even mediocre ones, are best at taking a prospect who's qualified, who has budget, who's interested, and carrying them to conclusion across the finish line. But in today's world, there are a lot of prospects that are looking around, they're searching, they're not quite ready to talk to anybody yet. And you've got to capture them, and you've got to nurture them, and you've got to keep them warm and make them more interested and qualify them, sometimes through their interaction with your company, not through a conversation, because they're not ready for a conversation yet. And when they're ready to interact with a salesperson, then have a clean handoff so that salesperson knows kind of the history of how that customer's interacted with the company up to now, knows what they're interested in, and is ready to have an informed conversation. And part of the difficulty there is, in the old days, if you will, the salesperson knew everything about the company and their products and their services, and the customer knew very little other than what they needed. And it was a little bit of a dance. Hey, tell me about your company. Yeah, let me tell you all about what we do and why we're so great. But today, with digital marketing and the internet, Google, and all these things, where most potential buyers have done 50 to 80% of the buyer's journey. They've done their research. They've narrowed it down to a few potential companies they want to talk to. They know more about your product or services than you ever thought they did, because they've done the research, and now they're ready to talk to you. And who has the power in that conversation? And if you're buying a car, the consumer knows what that car cost the dealership and how much margin is in it and how much negotiation room they have, because they've done all the research on cars.com and all the other websites. It's not that much different in B2B. So the balance of power has changed. And so sales has to act differently as a result of that. And the handoff between marketing and sales of what's a qualified lead, and how do we know what's qualified? Well, marketing and sales have to agree on what does a qualified lead look like, so that marketing is not saying, hey, we gave you all these great leads and you guys are terrible because you can't close them. Well, if you have agreement on what a qualified lead is that gets handed off to sales, then we can tell, do we have qualified leads or not? So it's a complicated dance, but definitely can be worked out where there's synergy between marketing and sales, not have the two at loggerheads.
Well, as you know, one of the things that we offer our clients is sales development as a service. Yep. And so a lot of times we will step into that gap that's created there and fill that void. So as the marketing team is generating leads, and they're, let's call them marketing qualified leads, right? They feel like they fit the profile of someone who would be a good customer, but they haven't been verified by the sales team yet, and they may or may not be ready to engage with the salesperson and start having a true sales conversation. We can step in, take that lead, and then engage with them, qualify them in a personal way, figure out where they're at in their process, and then validate that they are indeed a fit for the organization. And in a perfect case, we schedule them for a meeting because they've confirmed for us that they're ready, they're a fit, and they're ready. And then we hand off to the sales team. Now the sales team they've been unburdened with doing that sort of discovery, if you will. There's still a lot of discovery to go, but they've been unburdened with this idea of trying to validate whether or not they're qualified for a sales engagement yet. Yeah. And that can be really, really valuable. And obviously that is a role that has really it's a new role that didn't exist 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the sales team stretched up into that space because they're the only ones who would talk to customers, right? So they had to stretch themselves up into that space. Unfortunately, a lot of companies who don't have real professional marketing processes in place will stretch them further all the way into the marketing area where they're supposed to be knocking on doors and trying to figure out who, trying to get, right, which is a good professional sales organization will have already done that work with the sales team, right? They're there and engaged to a certain degree, right? So we call that the middle of the funnel. We call where we sit from a sales development standpoint. We're kind of in the middle of the funnel. We're sort of between, the marketing, demand generation, and branding area, and the sales team, where it's real boots on the street, so to speak.
And I would venture to say that your job is a lot easier if the company has clearly identified their ideal customer profile. If they understand the voice of the customer and can speak in the language of their customer in terms of what the customer's problem is, what the issues around that are, and how a particular company solves the problem, and puts their messaging together in a competent way to address that, maybe even nuanced from one market segment to another in those they serve, and then is able to generate more qualified leads that are easier because now there's a clear connection between the company and the customer in why they're talking in the first place. And that's where, you've referred to branding, and, people have all kinds of misconceptions about what branding really is. I think it's logos and, font types and colors.
Sure.
And the core of branding is really about how you present yourself to your market, especially in B2B, not necessarily the market in a global sense, but to your customers. For most B2B companies, it does not matter if the whole world knows who you are.
Right.
Completely irrelevant. The only thing that matters is if your potential customer knows who you are and translates that into value for them.
Right. It's like Seth Godin's, you need your tribe, right? You just need the tribe. And
exactly.
You can build an amazing business with just one strong, small tribe.
Yeah.
So kind of in conclusion here, Clay, I want to talk a little bit about Chief Outsiders because I'm curious, what does a typical engagement look like? How long does a typical engagement last? And kind of what would that experience look like for a business owner or business leader who's thinking about bringing in someone like a Chief Outsiders?
Sure. And let me start with a little bit of background for those who might not know us or what we do. The basics are that everybody in our firm has been a chief marketing officer in an operating company. We're not an ad agency. We're not a typical consultancy. All of our people are operating executives who have been responsible for growing businesses. And we do that for companies that are too small to be able to afford or even need a full-time chief marketing officer. And it's essentially, if you're familiar with software as a service, this is executives as a service, chief marketing officers as a service. And so typically we'll go into client engagement, and our average time in an engagement is around 6 months. We do a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in 6 months. We do have clients that we've had for 5 and 6 and 7 years. But most of our clients are shorter term than that. And what an engagement looks like is many things happening at the same time, but not far off what we've talked about in the growth gears and what you've read in the book. And if anybody wants the book, they can email me and I'll be happy to send them a copy or get them a digital copy of the growth gears. But the basics are that the 3 gears for growth are having good insight into yourself, your customers, and your competition, developing good strategy, all those elements I talked about earlier. Who is your ideal customer, your market segments, your product market fit, your pricing strategy, all those sorts of things that eventually leads to accountable and efficient and effective execution of the marketing so that it does generate opportunities. That's kind of the model of the growth gears. And the fourth gear is sales. Once those opportunities are generated, sales ought to be able to close more opportunities faster because they've got good leads and should feed that back into marketing. So if they understand why we're winning and why we're losing, and marketing gets that, that adds to the insight. And so a lot of our engagements kind of have a number of work streams that involve getting good insight in all three of those areas: company, customer, and competition. Developing the strategy as the foundation and executing on the marketing to generate opportunities. And it's not as linear as it might sound, because a lot of those things happen in parallel, but those are often the key things that are going on inside an engagement in order to get to the point where they truly have a marketing plan and what we call a growth engine, a repeatable process for generating leads that generate new business.
So your ideal client, will they have their own internal marketing staff already? Is that usually already in place and you're just coming in to give them some direction and structure and focus?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the company. We work with a lot of clients who have no marketing resource, or their marketing department is one junior person who's managing trade shows and deals with the web designer and things like that, but not somebody who's able to sit at the executive table and debate strategy. And so what we're doing is assessing what do they need internally, if anything. We have access to the best of the best outside marketing resources to execute. So often we're bringing those outside resources to our clients in order to continue the execution after our part of the engagement is finished. But we can be pretty hands-on. I mean, we're not, under the hood with a wrench and a screwdriver. We're directing those resources because ultimately we're not going to be with our client forever. And so we want to help them build a growth engine that they can continue to run after we're finished.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for spending a little time with me, Clay. This has been a really cool conversation, and I can't wait to have our future discussion about what is sales and marketing. Are they the same thing? Are they different? I look forward to having that conversation.
Me too.
You mentioned branding and how it's often misunderstood. I think the same thing can be said about marketing. It's this really, really big word, right? That everyone is underneath or feels like they're underneath or adjacent to at all times. So that'd be a fun conversation. Well, look, thanks so much for joining me today, and I appreciate you sharing your insight with us. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Clay, if they want to get a copy of Growth Gears, or they want to just have a conversation with you?
Thanks for that. The best way is email. Very easy. I'm Clay, CLAY, at chiefoutsiders.com.
Perfect.
I'm not always able to answer my phone, so emailing me and allowing me to set an appointment to talk is really the best way to get a conversation.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to have Clay's information in our notes underneath this show on our website, where we will post a copy of the episode with some description and some other ways to get in touch with Clay and the Chief Outsiders. So before I wrap up, I want to take a minute to thank all the new people who've started to follow our podcast. It's exciting to see the momentum build, and it's inspiring for me to actually continue to find great people like Clay to talk about business with. So thank you guys so much for that. If you know a business owner or CEO that is ready for a breakthrough and needs an expert guide, please share this podcast with them. I know Clay would love to be able to connect them with one of the CMOs at Chief Outsiders and get them started on their success journey. That'd be awesome. If you'd like to have a conversation today, I'd be grateful. If you liked the conversation, I should say, that we had today, I'd be grateful if you could give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. We're taking a second to give us a little love there has a huge impact on our ability to reach more people and to share some of this great content that we're going to a lot of trouble to create for you guys and having a lot of fun doing it. So thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, B2B leaders grow companies faster when they focus on the big three. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mike.
Pro Sales Connection is a sales and marketing firm that has been helping B2B companies grow faster since 2009. Learn more about our proprietary fastest path to revenue process for B2B companies. Experiencing the possibilities begins with a short 15-minute call. Schedule yours at www.prosalesconnection.com and click Get Started.